Hey all, it's Marco from Random Door Media here. Today I want to talk about the Dungeons & Dragons adventure called Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage, or just The Dungeon of the Mad Mage. Specifically about how I ran the campaign and ultimately how I ended it. Perhaps the story will be helpful to other dungeon masters who might want to see how someone else ran the adventure. Way back in 1991, TSR, that's Tactical Study Rules, released a box set adventure called The Ruins of Undermountain for the second edition of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. This was later followed by The Ruins of Undermountain 2, the Deep Levels. Set in the fictional world of the Forgotten Realms, below the grand city of Waterdeep, Undermountain was a mega dungeon, consisting of 9 levels and 14 sublevels. The adventure had a rich history of owners beginning with ancient elves, followed by a clan of mithril mining dwarves, then dark elves, who were then booted out of the area by a powerful wizard called Hallister Blackcloak. The wizard expanded on the old elven and dwarven halls to enlarge his domain to aid him in his magical and extraplanar research. In order to keep out trespassers, Hallister turned the halls into a gauntlet filled with traps and monsters. The third edition of Dungeons & Dragons had a related adventure called Expedition to Undermountain, and the adventure was rewritten as Halls of Undermountain for the 4th edition of Dungeons & Dragons. Then rewritten as Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage for the 5th edition, which is the one that I'm going to be talking about. Keep in mind that this video will have spoilers about this adventure. If you're going to be a player in the adventure, then you might not want to hear what I have to say. This video is more for dungeon masters that might want to see how someone else ran the game, and for people that are probably not going to play, but just like hearing role-playing game stories. I have been running Dungeons & Dragons adventures, as well as other role-playing games for several decades. I started way back with Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, back when there only was AD&D and the basic editions. My friends and I switched over to the 2nd edition, then eventually to 3rd. I never played or even read the original Ruins of Undermountain, and my gaming group did not play the 4th edition of Dungeons & Dragons, therefore I never played Halls of Undermountain. However, several years ago, my gaming group was getting into the 5th edition of D&D, and I wanted an adventure series that would be easy to run. Disclaimer: I also want to point out that I only know the lore and stories that was presented in the Dungeon of the Mad Mage adventure book, and my knowledge of any of the Forgotten Realms world at large and characters are limited. Therefore, if any of the history or plot elements that I'm going to go over differ from any established canon, please keep in mind that this story is not meant to follow established canon. This is the version of the adventure as I ran it. I thought that the Dungeon of the Mad Mage was going to be a mindless dungeon crawl. The player characters will just move from room to room, killing things and looting stuff. The first few levels does sort of feel that way, but the further we went down the dungeon, the more I realized that the adventure had more going for it than just hack and slash. Not only did each level have several mini-stories featuring many NPCs and factions, but the history came out more as the PCs explored and uncovered evidence of the ancient elven and dwarven societies. We had a party of 7 adventurers that all met up in the tavern, the Yawning Portal. The story is that the Yawning Portal was built by Durnan, an adventurer who had ventured into the mega dungeon and came out alive and rich. Durnan then retired from adventuring by opening the tavern, which had a deep well that led to the first floor of the Undermountain dungeon. Our adventuring group consisted of a tiefling conjuration wizard, a tabaxi samurai ranger, a half-dark elf divine soul sorceress, a Goliath battlemaster fighter, a dwarf forge cleric, a halfling scout rogue, and a dwarf rune knight fighter. The PCs also had some background reason for venturing into Undermountain. The halfling's parents were adventurers that never returned from the depths, and he wanted to find out what happened to them. The tabaxi's fiancée was taken by a rival, and the kidnapper fled into the dungeon. The dwarf cleric was looking for a new home that his clan could settle into. Although each dungeon level had its own characters and its own story, there was no ongoing story throughout the whole dungeon. There was no specific hook that would get the players to keep venturing forth other than the quest for treasure and their own personal goals. The book does have a section called Hallister's Goals, which provides some suggestion behind Hallister's motivations. Why does he tolerate adventures in his home? What's his aim? That's for you to decide. The book then provides 6 suggestions on how to handle the Mad Mage and even suggests the DM use a die 6 and determine randomly. One of the suggestions is that Hallister wants powerful adventurers to defeat a lich in Undermountain that has been a thorn in the Mad Mage's side. Another suggestion is that Hallister is looking for another spellcaster worthy of his time to become another apprentice. When I first started running the adventure, which lasted for over a year and a half by the way, I was not sure how I wanted to end it. While preparing the adventure, getting the characters and background made, I did not even think about the ending. After all, that was going to be a long while away anyways. But then something happened during the 3rd play session. The players were still on the 1st level, and they encountered a tiny pocket dimension with a cloned copy of Hallister Blackcloak. The copy would answer 3 questions, of which 2 would be truthful and 1 would be a lie. After asking questions about secret doors and then about treasure, the player posing the question used the 3rd one to ask how Hallister was feeling. That stumped me for a moment, and I had Hallister reply something to the effect of, "I'm tired and my feet have been aching all week." For some reason that sparked something in me and got me thinking, what if the antagonist in the story, Hallister Blackcloak, was not evil? What if something was happening behind the scenes causing him to act the way he did, and in reality he was just a tired old man? So that brings me to something that in the book was described as a knot in the weave. You see, a long time ago, a civilization of elves had their capital city where modern-day Waterdeep currently stands. When the elves left the region, they used powerful magic to erase evidence of the existence of their capital city. The magical incantation was so powerful it had an unintended side effect of causing a knot in the weave of magic, the fabric through which all magic is channeled. The knot is deep underground and causes madness in mortal beings that dwell near it for too long. This madness results in an obsession with the dungeon and a subconscious desire to remain near it. The book states that Hallister and his apprentices, as well as previous inhabitants of the area, had succumbed to this effect. So I decided to use this as the motivation behind the actions of Hallister Blackcloak. Instead of being an evil antagonist, Hallister became more and more under the control of the knot. This resulted in Hallister developing a split personality. One was the Mad Mage who used his power to expand the halls of Undermountain, stalk it with all manners of creature and turn it into a gauntlet to prevent anyone from reaching the knot. Then there was the good Hallister. During the times when this personality was able to take over, he would treat others well and try to assist adventurers in exploring the dungeon. Good Hallister realized that if he was too dominant, the power of the knot would get rid of him permanently and all that would exist would be Hallister the Mad Mage. As the characters descended through the depths, they would encounter evidence of this turmoil in the mage. On level 2, the characters defeated an animated puppet that looked like the Mad Mage, and when it was defeated, it made a comment, "Ugh, now who will find the cure?" But it collapsed before completing the sentence. Characters like Willow, the Archdruid on level 5, talked about there being a bad Hallister and a good Hallister. It was the good Hallister that created her underground force realm for her. Even though the characters progressed further through Undermountain than anyone else had done, Hallister did not confront them directly. This was because the good personality convinced the Mad Mage that the adventurers were helping in cleaning out the area so they could be restocked. Next, I have to introduce another character that would become instrumental in the playing out of the story. Sometime in the past, one of Hallister's apprentices tried to flee Undermountain upon realizing that Hallister was beset by madness. The name of the apprentice was Josira Kesselharp. Pardon me if that's not the proper pronunciation, but that's what it looks like. After trying to flee, Hallister imprisoned her in a place called the Citadel of the Bloody Hand. Josira magically confined herself to the walls of Undermountain and existed in a bodiless state. She used her new situation to avoid detection by the Mad Mage, but also to assist adventurers that might be powerful enough to defeat Hallister. Originally, Josira deemed the mage to be a potential threat to the world above, but later deduced the source of his madness to be the knot in the weave of magic. Realizing that the knot would eventually be bound so tight that it would cause a permanent negative effect on the function of magical energy, she determined the knot itself needed to be removed. However, she was unable to locate where the knot was while Hallister was still around. Additionally, Josira realized that anyone venturing into the depths of Undermountain either died or succumbed to the madness and would eventually just settle down in one of the many levels. Then, a group of adventurers traveled through the gauntlet, each with a specific motivation in mind. As long as this group focused on their personal goals and assisted those in need along the way, they seemed resistant to the madness. Those adventurers were the player characters in my group. Before the adventure even began, I suggested to the players to come up with some sort of motivation for why their characters would venture into Undermountain. I did that without even having the end goal in mind. I just worked it into the plot over time. As the PCs ventured down and down to the depths, they defeated many enemies, but they also made truces with other groups and even made several allies. On level 3, the adventurers helped the Hobgoblin Warlord and made a truce with him and his people. Realizing that they were not a threat, the PCs had a truce with the Stone Giants on level 7. Then, on level 19, the PCs encountered what was essentially a spaceship called the Scavenger that was marooned in a large cavern. After defeating all the guards, the Mind Flayer captain made a truce with the PCs and agreed not to harass them. The player characters left the Mind Flayer captain in peace. As the party continued downwards, defeating what the dungeon could throw at them, they were approached by Jasira. Prior to this point, they had brief encounters with the ex-apprentice, who gave them some simple guidance on their journey, and therefore she was not a complete stranger to them. This time, however, her disembodied voice spoke to them from the walls of Undermountain and confided in them of a great threat that was looming somewhere far below. Jasira told the group about the knot in the weave that had formed countless centuries before. She described how the existence of the knot twisted the weave of magic, resulting in the madness that affected many others, including the mage Halaster Blackcloak. She estimated that if the knot was not destroyed within a few weeks' time, there would be no way to unravel it, and the very fabric of magic would be twisted, resulting in chaos and wild magic everywhere in the world. She is not able to determine where the knot is. While Halaster still lives, Jasira is unable to travel to the lower depth of Undermountain. She bids the PCs to travel to the Mad Wizard's lair and defeat Halaster. Fortunately, the adventurers agree. They continue down the remaining levels, gaining strength as they do so. Eventually, they fight their way to and through the Mad Wizard's lair until they encounter Halaster himself. When the PCs first come to Halaster's throne room, Halaster calls back in a voice that sounds very tired. "You finally made it! I cannot hold them back much longer. Quick, you must!" But then his face becomes twisted and evil and he calls out, "Quiet, you! No more delays! It is now time for me to take care of your little heroes!" An epic battle ensues with the party using all of their abilities and working in tandem. Halaster unleashes the fury of his magical arsenal, but even he is not omnipotent and soon falls to the might of the heroes. Right after he's defeated, Halaster stumbles to the floor and makes a final gesture, causing a wavering magical rift to appear in the air, through which can be vaguely seen a large cavern. "Hurry," he says in a tired voice. "Go through the portal and destroy the knot in the weave, before it causes me to reform again." And then Halaster's body fades away. After going through the portal, the PCs appear in a huge cavern that is dimly lit by waves and pulses of magical light. There appears to be remnants of structures in various locations, and the remains of past combatants litter the floor, armor, weapons, and bones. The adventurers see a strange ripple in the air that undulates and shifts. The thing changes form constantly, from a vortex to a ripple to a shimmer. Any character that has spell slots feel a strange effect, as if their own magic is not reliable. The party realize that this is the knot, a knot or twist in the very fabric of magic itself. They know that weapons will not have any effect on it. As a construct of magic, they must defeat it with anti-magic. The spellcasters in the group get ready to cast counterspell and dispel magic spells. Upon seeing the knot, the PCs see what appear to be small nodes that are connected to the main one. It looks like the knot is expanding. There really is not much time left before magic itself becomes so twisted and knotted that using magic will become extremely unreliable. Any magic anywhere could result in chaotic, wild magic. As the party approaches the knot, it retaliates each combat round by causing some random effect to occur. Creatures teleport at random one round. Magic ceases to work altogether another round. Reality itself distorts, causing all checks to be made with disadvantage. Random items from the battlefield suddenly animate, and the PCs find their actions hindered by animated flying weapons, animated suits of armor, and even the ground itself rises up, taking on the form of earth elementals and stone golems. The adventurers realize that the knot is unaffected by anything they do until they can weaken it by taking out the nodes. While the spellcasters use counterspell and dispel magic on the nodes, the fighter types handle the animated minions. After many rounds of trying to gain ground in the fight, disaster strikes when the knot causes Halaster Blackcloak to reform full of spells and magical power. Party members are wounded, spell slots are running low, and now they have to defeat the Mad Mage again in addition to everything else. Morale gets low, the players start talking about just getting out of there and trying to formulate another plan. But how can they escape? High-level spell slots were used in dispelling the nodes. Just as all hope seems lost and the campaign was going to end with the adventurers defeated and the failure to complete the final quest, all party members hear a familiar voice in their head. The voice of Desria Kesselhart saying, "On your left." Now I know that sentence made no sense within the contents of the story, but the movie Avengers Endgame had come out only 2 years before and was still fresh in my mind. And the players really seemed to enjoy the reference. Magical portals begin appearing about the vast cavern. Out steps the various allies that the players made friends with during the 1.5-year campaign. Willow, the archdruid, steps forth followed by her animal minions and says, "I will always be thankful to good Halaster for my woodland realm, but it's time I stopped forgiving bad Halaster for ruining my life." He's at the lich that the PCs parlayed with earlier on, steps out of a portal and upon seeing Halaster says, "Calling Halaster Blackcloak, turn around you overaged degenerate and we'll bump heads." Guess where that reference is from. After the portals spew out ally after ally, the PCs regroup and coordinate attacks. NPC spellcasters assist with weakening the knot, while combat fighters protect the spellcasters and defeat the animated minions. Combat continues for several more rounds. It becomes more about describing actions rather than rolling dice. There are way too many things in play for me to act out individually. The final node is destroyed. The knot is now vulnerable. However, the knot emits a shockwave, knocking everyone prone except Halaster. All spell slots are drained and magical items are temporarily inert. Halaster starts casting some big spell. This is it. This is the end. The PCs and their allies are helpless to stop Halaster and ultimately destroy the knot. But then, the Mad Mage stops and shakes his head. His face seems less insane and instead somewhat confused. He looks at the knot and calls out, "You obstructed my mind for too long. I realize now that my thoughts were not my own. It was you that twisted my mind and controlled my actions. No more. It was magic that created you, and it will be magic that will destroy you." Halaster disappears only to reappear right in the middle of the knot. He screams out, "No more," as he appears to be drawing the knot into himself. In a flash, everything goes dark. A mote of light appears where Halaster and the knight were, lighting up the cavern, but there is no trace of either of them. All spellcasters or anyone with a connection to the weave of magic feel an unbinding. Magic in the area flows freely again. However, everyone still has no spell slots. The cave starts shaking and debris begins to fall from the ceiling. Both the threat of the knot and of Halaster have ended, but now everyone, both adventurers and allies alike, are trapped in this enormous cavern that appears to have no exit and is falling apart around them. No one has spell slots available to cast teleport or something similar. People scramble about looking for shelter or trying to come up with some sort of escape, but it appears that the cave will collapse within minutes. All seems lost. Again. Then, everyone hears a strange sound, and a weird-looking ship materializes in the center of the cavern. The front portal opens and a familiar illithid face peers out and says, "Arr! You appear to be in a bit of a mess, and this place appears to be falling apart. Get ye all aboard this scavenger, and we will get out of here." Everyone, adventurers and allies alike, stone giants, dark elves, and more, climb aboard the ship. Just as the cavern collapses, the ship fades away and everyone escapes. Where are we going? Arr, who knows? But we'll probably find adventure and booty there. And that was how I ended my playthrough of Waterdeep, Dungeon of the Mad Mage. I hope you found this video interesting and or entertaining. If not, I thank you for watching this long. If you did, maybe subscribe to the channel or click on like. Do you have a story from the Dungeon of the Mad Mage adventure to share? If so, post it in the comments. That is it for now. Take care, everyone.